Nobuaki is your average disgusting loser living the American dream with his hot girlfriend until he is pulled into a deadly king's game. Eventually, he has to see his girlfriend get clapped by his best friend for survival. However, before any of this, the school sports festival is taking place and Nobuaki's team member falls onto the ground during the race and is late in transferring the baton. Nobuaki then makes a run for it and eventually gives the baton to Natsuko. She manages to pass the person in front of her and eventually, her G-cups touch the finish line first, winning her the race. Everyone starts congratulating Nobuaki and their class takes a group photo afterwards. Before any of that happened, Nobuaki transferred to this school and sat next to Natsuko, who introduced herself to him. She starts asking him various questions, but Nobuaki decides to continue his mewing streak and keep quiet.
Nice.
She then makes a cute little drawing for him, but Nobuaki still ignores her. Following that, Natsuko notices Nobuaki weeping. During break time, all the students gather around him and try to ask him various questions, but he asks them to leave him alone. Another student tries to pressure him into becoming friends, but Nobuaki shoves him aside and runs out of class. Ryona suggests that they leave him alone. Natsuko also skips class and asks Nobuaki if he is scared to make friends, and he runs away again. A few days later, Natsuko asks if he wants to participate in the relay race, but Nobuaki refuses. His other classmates ask him to participate as well, offering to cut his hair if he agrees. She finds out that Natsuko is the anchor as she is pretty fast, and she makes up her mind to take first place no matter what. However, Nobuaki is still hesitant about it. Later that day, Nobuaki hears two girls talking about how cheerful Natsuko is even when both her parents met their demise in a plane crash. This makes Nobuaki think about how losing people dear to her must have hurt, making him wonder how she can still smile so brightly. Back in the present, Nobuaki wonders how long it has been since he had fun and wants things to stay the same. Surprisingly, at midnight, they all receive a message about the king's game, making Nobuaki realize he can't escape no matter what. The next day, his classmates show the text they received to Nobuaki, asking him if he is behind it. Nobuaki disagrees and realizes that his classmates have the same reaction as last time. Nobuaki then speaks out loud and tells everyone not to run away from the game as they can pass it if they all work together. Everyone starts laughing and the boys questions if he really wants to kiss Natsuko like the king's challenge, but Nobuaki argues that if they don't complete the challenge within 24 hours, they can meet their demise. However, no one believes him and returns to their seats. Later at the rooftop, Nobuaki thinks about how words won't be enough to make them believe and how his last classmates didn't believe until the first casuals. Just then, a girl named Amy arrives and tells Nobuaki that she will support him if he really likes Natsuko. She also offers to give him her contact, but Nobuaki asks her to leave, apologizing for all the weird stuff he said this morning. Nobuaki thinks about how he will be eliminated if he doesn't complete the challenge and thinks that it's better to be the first one to be eliminated. At night, Natsuko finds Nobuaki sitting in the park and asks about his behavior, wondering if it is her fault. Nobuaki then notices that there are only 5 minutes left in the challenge and asks her to leave. Natsuko then asks Nobuaki if he likes someone, reminding him of when he popped the cherry. Instead of replying to her question, Nobuaki asks her how heaven looks like and she replies that what matters is that they are currently alive. She then jumps off the fence and comments on how only a minute remains. She offers to help, but Nobuaki refuses with tears in his eyes. This results in Natsuko hugging Nobuaki and asking if he wants to date her. She then suggests kissing her, but Nobuaki pushes her away. Natsuko takes this as his answer but kisses him anyway, telling him that the kiss was a challenge to his girlfriend as she won't give up. Nobuaki then apologizes and hugs Natsuko, making her confused about his mixed personality. Following that, he notices that the message that he thought was about time over was actually from Amy and he completed the challenge before midnight. Afterward, more challenges involving his classmates start to appear. One of the challenges is about the classmates not sleeping and Nobuaki asks Natsuko to ask everyone to stay awake. Apparently, the punishment is that people who disobey will be hanged. Nobuaki starts freaking out and asks about his classmates' address from Natsuko. He then decides to visit them while asking her to class the rest of them. Nobuaki runs to Tsubasa's house and pushes him, who is about to hang himself. He asks Tsubasa's parents to call the ambulance as his face matches that of a chameleon. Nobuaki notices more and more texts about disobedience and returns to the park where everyone is gathered. Sadu starts confronting Nobuaki about how this isn't funny anymore. One of their classmates confessed that she went to Nanami's house and saw that she had hung herself. Everyone starts freaking out and Sadu questions Nobuaki about it. He informs them that he has played this game before. His classmates question what happened in the last game, and Nobuaki tells them that everyone met their demise except for him. Everyone stays silent for a while until one girl confronts Nobuaki for refusing to kiss Natsuko. She thinks that by refusing, Nobuaki tried to eliminate her. Surprisingly, Nobuaki agrees to this, which makes everyone furious, and Satu lands a punch on his face. Everyone starts thinking that he is the one sending these texts. One of the girls mentions how Satu just received a punishment. Suddenly, blood starts spilling from all over his body and he eventually passes away. Everyone starts freaking out while Nobuaki stands up, deciding to complete this new king's game. Nobuaki then announces that blaming him won't solve anything and they need to work together in order to not lose anyone else. This makes Natsuko realize that she will meet her demise unless she does the deed with Teruaki. Nobuaki replies that it's better than losing her life, but Natsuko is still hesitant as she is still a cherry girl. She wants to do it with someone she loves, and Nobuaki tells her to discuss this matter with Teruaki. This statement makes her mad, reminding Nobuaki how she feels about him. In the past, Heike wanted to get some action with Satomi, but she didn't want to. His challenge is to touch her plot. Minako gets in his way, but Heike argues that the king's orders are absolute. They think that Heike was the one who made that message in the first place. In the end, he gives up and walks away, making Naoya mention how Satomi's F-cups would have been spoiled by Heike's sweaty hands. But Nobuaki replies that he was just messing around as no one believes in the king game. At night, Nobuaki receives another similar text about a hookup, but he ignores it. The next day, their teacher informs the class that both Satomi and Heike passed away last night. Apparently, they both hanged themselves and Nobuaki realized what was going on. Naoya talks about the events happening just as they were mentioned in King's Game. Misaki agrees that it all happened because of the King's Game. However, Chimi believes that it is all a coincidence as people don't get eliminated by playing a game and everyone starts agreeing with him. Misaki's boyfriend threatens her to not hook up with the class nerd because of the challenge or he will break up. After school, Chimi runs into Nobuaki and he comments on how two of his classmates passed away. He further mentions how Heike was a good guy when he received a text about completed obedience. Chimi wonders about what might happen if such an order came to them. The next day, Naoya talks about the next challenge, which is Shouta giving orders to someone, and Nobuaki tells Naoya to not lose his life like Heike did. In class, Shouta beats the crap out of the nerd while asking if smashing his girlfriend felt good. Nobuaki tries to stop him and he eventually calms down. Following that, Shouta comments on him having the authority to give orders and tells the nerd to go and hang himself. Turns out this is registered as an actual challenge that everyone receives. Nobuaki gets furious and confronts Shouta, but he replies that he was just trying to mess around. Later that day, Nobuaki goes to the nerd, Daisuke, and tells him that the king's game has to be some sort of prank. But he replies how Heike and Satomi hanged themselves the way the king's order said. Nobuaki tries to tell him that it was a coincidence, but Daisuke doesn't believe him, saying that even a retard knows that it isn't.
You serious?
He then lies next to Daisuke, telling how his mood improves when he listens to some Ice Spice, mentioning how he wants to put a band together. Apparently, he practices guitar every day but isn't getting any better at it. Daisuke reveals that being a musician is his dream as well, saying that his passion for music won't lose out to anyone. This statement fires Nobuaki up and he suggests practicing together, and even if he receives the punishment from the king, he will make sure to stop him. After school, they arrive at his house and are surprised to see how rich he is. He is excited after looking at his music equipment, and with that being said, the three of them begin practicing. After having fun practicing for a few hours, they take a break and Nobuaki notices Daisuke's bracelet, wanting one as well. Daisuke agrees to let him have it if he passes away, but Nobuaki wants it if he lives and promises to make it happen no matter what. With that being said, they start practicing again and it is finally midnight. Daisuke realizes that he is still alive and they all start celebrating. He then goes to get something to drink and Nobuaki receives a call from Chimi, asking if Daisuke is alright. He reassures her that he is, but suddenly, Naoya screams, telling Nobuaki that the obedience was completed. They both run to Daisuke's room, only to see him hanging from the ceiling. Back in the present, Nobuaki reveals that they would drop like flies if they did things on their own. Teruaki tells Natsuko that he doesn't want to meet his demise. However, Natsuko pushes him away and asks Nobuaki to sleep with her before she does with Teruaki, but he refuses. Teruaki starts forcing himself on Natsuko and pins her down. She suddenly gets up and kicks Teruaki in his guts, asking if Nobuaki really doesn't know a way to get out of the king's game. She then starts by taking off her clothes, and when Nobuaki tries to stop her, Natsuko pushes him away. Nobuaki asks her who she is, and Natsuko replies that she is the same girl who fell in love and the one he tried to eliminate. Following that, she takes him away and Nobuaki tells her how they all need to play together. He doesn't care what they did to him as long as he can save them. But Natsuko finds it annoying as he needs to care about himself more than the others. She then begins choking him, asking him to leave or meet his demise. He then pushes her away, but Natsuko starts screaming, acting as if Nobuaki was assaulting her. Surprisingly, even after everyone sees her behavior, no one believes Nobuaki and starts blaming him instead. While he is getting beaten to a pulp, Natsuko tells Mitsuki to text Nobuaki and order him to end his life as she got this authority from the king. Mitsuki starts hesitating, but Nobuaki begins manipulating her, telling her that he will receive what he deserves. Everyone starts to notice her changing behavior when suddenly, a person named Kento arrives, calling out Nobuaki. Kenta then walks towards them and freaks out after looking at the bloody corpse. He then asks Nobuaki if he is hurt, realizing that his classmates are the ones who did this to him. He confronts them and asks them to take him on if they want to get violent. Nobuaki thanks Kenta, but he wants an explanation instead of a thank you. Natsuko then steps forward, asking Kenta not to interrupt if he doesn't understand anything. She then starts forcing Mitsuki to send the text or she will meet her demise as well. She wants to add Kenta to the list as well, but Mitsuki mentions how Natsuko is acting pretty strange. Nobuaki then asks Mitsuki to send one to him and the other one to Natsuko, but she refuses to do so. She accidentally breaks her phone in rage and wonders if she can buy another, but Natsuko replies that it is already too late. Natsuko then asks Teruaki to go somewhere else, but Kenta throws her onto the ground and says that she can't just leave. He then grabs Nobuaki in order to take him to the hospital, and Mitsuki requests to take her as well. He agrees and Natsuko asks to come along but gets slapped by Kenta instead. Following that, Kenta takes them to the hospital and Mitsuki starts mentioning how she doesn't want to meet her demise. However, Kenta reassures that everything will be fine as he has the king's authority and sends himself in order to protect Mitsuki and save her life. Mitsuki thanks Kenta for the help and he asks Nobuaki if this was all his fault. Nobuaki agrees and comments on how he should eliminate himself as well. Kenta then asks him about what happened in the last king's game. He tells him how the day after Daisuke's demise, Nobuaki told everyone that their demise wasn't a coincidence and the king's game was real. He then shows the next order, which is a popularity poll between Naoya and Kana. Whoever loses will be eliminated. Some of them don't want to do it, but one girl mentions that if they don't vote, both the contestants will be punished. Later, he figures that they will need at least 16 votes and decides to talk to the other student. Shimi can't convince all the girls but wants to convince the ones she is close to. Naoya still wonders how Kana can be punished because of him, but Nobuaki tells him that it is not the time to worry about others as he can't afford to lose him as well. While Nobuaki is convincing Mitsuki, Kana arrives and starts pressuring her to vote for her. Hearing both of them makes her freak out and comments on how she can't choose either of them. This results in Nobuaki getting on his knees and talking about how Daisuke was eliminated in front of him and he can't bear to lose that shrimp as well. Kana calls Nobuaki a coward for using Daisuke, but Naoya argues that he is trying to save his life. Mitsuki eventually makes her decision to vote for Naoya, making Kana furious and calling her awful. She then walks away, thinking about how she won't be losing her life because of Naoya. She starts off by making the thirsty weebs fall for her and get them on her side. Later that day, Shout arrives and tells Nobuaki how Daisuke was eliminated because he thought of the game as a joke and mentions how he will be eliminating a person if he doesn't vote for them. Nobuaki replies that Daisuke's demise wasn't all his fault as he needed to be a little more careful when at his house as well. He further comments on how his vote can save someone's life as well, telling Shouta that he wants to save his friend. Shouta then lets him know that Kana has been selling her plot in order to confirm her votes and she has already popped the cherry of many loners. Nobuaki then asks one of the fadas of their class if he will vote for Naoya and he agrees in a hesitant voice. Shouta lets him know that his hesitant voice confirms it and lets Nobuaki know that he will be voting for Naoya. Finally, it is time for the voting to take place and Kana is confident in herself. Eventually, Nobuaki starts counting the votes and Kana can't believe why the two of them are almost at equal votes. The two of them are now tied and Nobuaki holds the last vote. Kana thinks that Nobuaki might cheat and decides to read the vote herself. She finally opens the paper and finds her name inside, announcing that she won. Naoya falls onto the ground and starts crying, but Nobuaki opened the whole paper and an apology for Kana along with a vote for Naoya is written. Kana takes the paper and rips it to shreds in anger. Suddenly, they all receive a text from the king about the punishment. Kana then runs towards the window and jumps outside, resulting in her demise. Turns out Kana's punishment was for her to confess to the person she liked, but Kana took things into her own hands and eliminated herself. She was then taken to the hospital and Nobuaki told Naoya that he was not sure if she could make it through the night. Naoya then thanks Nobuaki for saving his life, but Nobuaki confesses how he told lies to the whole class to get their support. But Nobuaki planned it in a way where he could avoid the worst outcome even if he is found. He gave them a limit of 5 minutes to take Naoya's side and they instantly switched sides. If those people were to make his lies public, they would be confessing to betraying Kana as well. Nobuaki starts calling himself a monster, but Naoya replies that the king is the real monster and he only dirtied his hands to save Naoya. At night, Chimi and Naoya are at Nobuaki's house, waiting for the next challenge to arrive. He promises Chimi that he'll protect her no matter what. This makes Naoya jealous as he has such a great girlfriend like Chimi. Suddenly, they receive a message about how Naoya has to accept punishment as Kana is no longer in this world. His punishment is that he has to lose his V card before the end of the day. However, there are only 10 minutes left before the day ends. Having no other choice, Nobuaki throws both Naoya and Chimi inside a room, asking him to do it with Chimi. She also tells Naoya that he has to do it, but Naoya doesn't want to betray the two of them. This results in Nobuaki knocking out Naoya, asking Chimi to do the deed while he is knocked out. Soon after, the obedience is complete and Chimi comes out crying and is hugged by Nobuaki. Back in the present, Kenta finds it a little weird but mentions how most people wouldn't go that far to help a friend. Nobuaki then starts crying while Kenta tries to console him. Kenta asks Nobuaki to go to the hospital while he looks for Mitsuki's phone, but Nobuaki argues that he needs to be somewhere. Apparently, the key to ending King's Game might be there. Around 30 years ago, the King's Game was first held in a village. It was an ordinary village until a single piece of paper changed everything. They were ordered from the king, and because of that, all the villagers there might be some records of that time left there. Kenta agrees that it is a good option and asks Nobuaki to take him as well. Mitsuki is scared to be alone and asks to come along as well. Nobuaki agrees, and the next day, all three of them are on their way. Mitsuki tries showing her sneakers, but Kenta tells her that her anime plot is on display. Apparently, Mitsuki brought her old phone and Kenta advised her to switch over from the broken phone. Mitsuki says that according to Natsuko, she might be eliminated by doing that, but Nobuaki tells her not to believe that girl. She then apologizes for not being strong enough as the thought of demise scares her. Nobuaki sees his old classmate in Mitsuki, and Kenta asks Nobuaki if he knows the person behind the King's Game. However, he doesn't know either and thought it was his old classmates back then. In the past, Nami orders herself to touch the king and Nobuaki calls her, asking why she didn't order herself to do something simpler. Turns out it was her plan to find the king, as they think that the person might be in their class. Nobuaki likes that idea but is still concerned about him not being in their class. But Nami wants to do it as Nobuaki believes that the king is their classmate. Nobuaki replies that he doesn't want to see a friend meet their demise once again, and Nami tells him that she wants the same. If she were able to achieve this, then she would be a hero and the King's Game would end. The next day, Nobuaki informs everyone about the details and how Nami will be risking her life to find the king. Everyone starts praising Nami and Nobuaki decides to start with the boys. She starts off by touching the fatty and finds out that he isn't the king. Eventually, none of the boys are the king and now it is time for the girls. It's Ria's turn and Nobuaki realizes that she is the most suspicious one. But before Nami can even touch her, Ria confesses that she is the king. She then asks what they might do if she were the king, as this wouldn't end the game. Ria further mentions that if there isn't a certain way of finding the king's identity, someone in their class will lose their life. The only way to end the King's Game according to her is to eliminate the king. However, Nobuaki doesn't think he can eliminate the king. Ria then forces Nami to touch her and they find out that Ria wasn't the king. Nobuaki starts panicking about how only 5 girls remain and realizes that he has to end the game no matter what. Next up is Chimi, and she asks Nami if she is alright, but Nami replies that the remaining ones have to be the king as Nobuaki said so. Just when Nami touches Chimi, Nobuaki receives a text, but it is only from his mother. At this point, even Nami starts panicking and asking Nobuaki that the king should be among the 4 left. This results in Nami running away and pushing Chimi, who tried stopping her. Nobuaki goes after her and tries to call but isn't able to reach her. Nobuaki starts getting anxious but controls his emotions and thinks of a place where she can be alone. He eventually goes to the riverside and finds Nami sitting there. She asks Nobuaki if she will meet her demise at midnight, but Nobuaki tries to reassure her that the punishment won't be that bad and she won't lose her life. This results in Nami crying and apologizing to Nobuaki, but he mentions how she trusted his theory and put her life on the line to save others. She then requests Nobuaki to stay with her till midnight, commenting on how it makes her really happy. Only 5 minutes remain and Nami realizes that she never got to tell Nobuaki about her true feelings. Just when she is about to confess, the message from King arrives and she notices that everything is suddenly dark. Nobuaki realizes that her punishment might be her going blind. Soon after, Nobuaki receives an order from the king that is to lose something important to him. Following that, Nami receives a call from Chimi and she asks her about the order that Nobuaki received. Nobuaki then realizes that Nami ran somewhere and he tries asking Naoya, but she isn't at school either. Both of them start finding Nami and he finally picks up her call. Nami comments on how she doesn't want to worry him any longer, asking if she is important to her. Nobuaki agrees and Nami tells him that she heard about the order from Chimi. She then then comments on how being blind is harder than she thought, but Nobuaki promises to protect her. However, she cuts the call while Nobuaki rushes back home and smashes everything that was important to him. He then receives a call from Nami, telling him that she won't forget the time they spent together, and says her goodbyes. While running towards Nami, he receives a call from Chimi and he tells her how he has been cheating on her with Nami in order to lose Chimi and save Nami's life. He then asks her to break up with him and cuts the call, eventually arriving at the beach. He finds Nami's phone ringing and sees a confession from Nami along with footsteps heading towards the ocean. He tries finding her in the water but is unable to and later starts crying. Soon after, he notices Ria standing nearby, calling him an idiot. Ria mentions how Nami's punishment wasn't her demise, yet she chose it on her own. Nobuaki gets furious and grabs her collar. Ria tells him to use that scary face of his and try to eliminate her, as according to her, she is the king. Nobuaki tells her that Nami proved that no one was the king in their class, but Ria disagrees, as she forcefully made Nami touch her and she didn't do it herself. Nobuaki gets furious and throws her onto the ground, commenting on how he will eliminate her if she really is the king. However, she finds him really boring and teases Nobuaki, telling him that he would have met his demise if she were the real king. Ria further asks Nobuaki if he can really eliminate the king with his level of resolve. Following that, she mentions that she enjoys the king's game and will be the one to beat the king. Elsewhere, Kaori asks Yasuke about how long the king's game will continue, and he reassures her that he will eventually end the game and save her. She then remembers how her older brother used to bully her and Yasuke protected her. Kaori then suggests exchanging phone numbers and walks away after telling Yasuke that she trusts him. More and more of their classmates met their demise, and Nobuaki gave Naoya Nami's phone. Suddenly, he receives a call from Yasuke, telling him that he found a clue. Apparently, all the casualties got a text from the king. Yasuke is still not sure, but it could lead them to a way to end the king's game. He then checked Nami's phone and it had a message with letters RE. Yasuke thanks Nobuaki for the help and decides to work together. Nobuaki then mentions how Ria has been calling herself the king and how he can never tell what she is thinking. This makes Yasuke tell him that she used to smile a lot and wasn't like she currently, but her biological father took advantage of her, and because of that, she stopped showing emotions or opening up. In the end, Yasuke asks Nobuaki to take care of Kaori if anything happens to him. Just then, they receive a message from the king about 3 people getting punished for disobedience. Turns out it happened because they all did something unnecessary. Nobuaki decides to call Chimi and asks Naoya to call those who got a punishment text. Eventually, Shouta picks up Nobuaki's calls but can't breathe. He tells Nobuaki that he tried to block it but passes away before elaborating. Nobuaki starts panicking, and Naoya comments on how he most likely tried blocking the texts yesterday. He heard Shouta, Takayuki, and Yusuke wondering what might happen if they blocked the king. Nobuaki remembers that one of the rules of the king's game was that they can't leave it in the middle. They then realize that Ikumi most likely also cancelled her cell phone and could be in danger. At the same time, Yusuke's hands get severed and he loses his life. Nobuaki then tries calling Chimi, but she doesn't answer her phone. He decides to go to her house, asking Naoya to tell everyone not to block the king. On his way to her house, Nobuaki informs Hiroko about it but then receives a message about her punishment, making him confused. He then calls her again and Hiroko mentions that she didn't do anything when suddenly she starts having problems breathing and passes away. Afterward, Nobuaki calls Hirofumi but he can't figure out the reason he is getting punished as well. Nobuaki tries apologizing and Hirofumi begins to cry, thanking Nobuaki for all the help before cutting the call. Following that, Nobuaki asks Naoya to warn everyone not to cry, as the challenge from the king is to not cry. If any friend or someone loses their life, the other person will probably cry and lose their life. He then tries calling Chimi once again but she doesn't pick up, making him wish to see her one more time. Soon after, Nobuaki calls Yasuke and tells her that he can't hold back his tears any longer, but Yasuke replies that he found a major clue that could end the king's game. He tells Nobuaki how the king's game has happened before in Yonaki village. Apparently, it was 30 years ago when Yasuke sent Nobuaki the data. However, Nobuaki doesn't have any motivation left and asks Yasuke to work with Naoya and track the king down. Suddenly, he hears Yasuke cry and Nobuaki starts reminding him of Kaori, but Yasuke tells him that he needs to go to the village as Nobuaki is the last hope of everyone. He then cuts the call, and just when he is about to send the data, his wrist severs, but Yasuke uses his other arm to send the data to Nobuaki. He then receives a call from Kaori, but before he can pick it up, Yasuke meets his demise. Meanwhile, Nobuaki tries his best not to cry and realizes that it is still too soon to lose hope. Following that, Nobuaki calls Kaori and warns her not to cry no matter what happens. Additionally, he asks her to not talk to anyone on the phone. She then asks Nobuaki if he has heard from Yasuke, and Nobuaki replies that he just talked to him and told her about the village. She asks him not to do something that reckless, but he cuts the call. Later, Nobuaki is ready to leave for the village when a person knocks him out. He then finds himself in a warehouse with Kaori standing in front of him. She accuses Nobuaki of eliminating all her classmates along with Yasuke, mentioning that she liked him and wanted to date him. But Nobuaki tells her that Yasuke staked his life to send him the data and he has to see it through. He then tells Kaori that Yasuke liked her too and asks him to protect her. This reminds her of the time when Yasuke protected her and she fell onto the ground. Unfortunately, Kaori starts tearing up and eventually meets her demise. Nobuaki is tied up on the ground while Ria holds his phone. She told him that she didn't mind if he got eliminated but insisted he tell her something first. Curiously, she asked him if Yasuke had been investigating the king's game. Back in the present, Nobuaki and Kenta stood to the side of the road when Mitsuki hurried over. Nobuaki assured her that as long as she could still receive texts from the king, she was safe to proceed. While on their way, Nobuaki told them that he was glad at least he had Chimi with him. Mitsuki asked him if she was his girlfriend. Kenta further said that he gets the feeling what comes next is gonna be even worse, asking him if it was something that could happen to them. Nobuaki agreed to tell them and mentioned that Naoya kept on calling Nobuaki but he couldn't reach his number. Suddenly someone picked up and told him that it was Toshiyuki. Naoya then asked him what they should do about today's order. Toshiyuki replied solemnly that if they messed up this order, they would all face dire consequences. The order dictated that one class member had to roll a die. Both the roller and those chosen would be punished. If no one rolled or the roller refused to choose, everyone would suffer the consequences. Reflecting on Nobuaki's absence, Toshiyuki remarked that if he were here, he would know what to do. After hearing this, Naoya realized he couldn't contact Nobuaki and resolved to protect Chimi instead. On the other hand, Toshiyuki and the others sat together, and after being angry he asked about Nobuaki and Ria. He further asked who was gonna roll the dice. Chimi reminded him of Nobuaki's advice to trust each other and cooperate. Amidst the escalating arguments, Nobuaki and Ria suddenly arrived together. Toshiyuki approached Ria, expressing concern that with more people involved his chances of rolling the dice or being chosen for punishment decrease. He confided in Naoya that he might secretly be relieved about it. In response, Naoya attempted to punch him, but Toshiyuki swiftly retaliated, knocking Naoya down. Toshiyuki then handed over the dice to Fujioka, saying if anybody else rolls it, they'll name him first. After that, Nobuaki came forward and got Fujioka on the ground. While he told Nobuaki that he couldn't stand this, he didn't want to see his friend like this. Others began speculating that Toshiyuki might be the first one chosen for punishment. Suddenly, Toshiyuki lunged towards Chimi, gripping her tightly with her hands restrained behind her back. With a knife drawn, he pressed it against her neck, his expression tense with anger. The others started taunting him, saying he was too much of a coward to eliminate anyone. He then targeted Chimi's leg and threatened that any interference would lead to her elimination, along with the rest of them. Turning to Nobuaki and Naoya, he demanded they roll the dice first. Naoya, visibly fearful, understood that rolling meant risking elimination for himself, while not rolling meant Chimi would suffer. Suddenly, Nobuaki intervened, stating he would roll. He reached out for the dice, but just as he did, Naoya stepped forward and snatched the dice from Nobuaki's hand. He told Nobuaki that they needed him to protect Chimi and defeat the king, emphasizing that it was for both of them. He expressed his readiness to roll the dice, determined to take the risk. Suddenly, Naoya impulsively threw the dice to the ground despite Nobuaki's attempt to stop him. The dice landed with the number 6 facing up. Naoya then got a message from the king, saying he had 10 minutes to designate 6 of his classmates. Toshiyuki started suggesting he say Chia or Minako. Suddenly one of them got the message that he would be punished to his demise by decapitation. His entire face rolled backward and he got eliminated. However, Nobuaki further told Kenta that in extreme situations people lost their cool, and friends started fighting because of the fear and chaos, and his classmates continued to be executed one by one. And Masami, the girl in the hospital, was the first to be named. As tension mounted, it was Nobuaki and the others' turn. Suddenly, Fujioka struck his friend with a punch, and Naoya, in pain, managed to utter Toshiyuki's name. Collapsing to the ground, he whispered that he was relieved he could save both Nobuaki and Chimi. Abruptly, his arm began to throb and then detached completely. Ria took Naoya's phone from his pocket. Upon asking, she told Nobuaki that she was going to take down the king before the next order came at midnight. She then took out her laptop and said she had been looking into the king's game this whole time, and she couldn't find everything on her own. She got closer to an answer by adding Yasuke's data to her own. Over 30 years ago, a series of deaths occur at Yanaki village, marking the first king's game. Their orders were delivered to the villagers on paper, but afterward, some scientists theorized that it might have been caused by a virus. Nobuaki asked her how they got a virus from text messages. She told him the suggestions were like a type of infectious disease and the virus born in Yanaki village was never eradicated. She further told them that she would now eliminate all the kings on the network. She then started using antivirus to combat the king's game that caused her hands to get fire, realizing that the bug set itself as a trap. She then started burning on fire and was eliminated. Nobuaki along with Kenta and Mitsuki are going through a forest when they stumble on an old-looking hole that leads to the Yanaki village. After entering the hole, Nobuaki notices that there are no signals and Kenta reminds him of how Mitsuki has to send 2 texts as her challenge. He suggests letting her send those 2 texts to Natsuko and Haruka. However, Kenta doesn't really like this idea and the two of them start to argue until Mitsuko points out that the other side of the hole isn't sealed. Nonetheless, they get out from the other hole and finally reach Yanaki village, which is now a ghost town. He starts wandering around until Kenta notices a house with his family name. Nobuaki decides to go inside while Kenta and Mitsuki wait outside. There, he finds a picture of Chimi and her father along with a letter where her father is apologizing to her. Suddenly, he hears Kenta looking for Mitsuki outside. While searching for her, Kenta receives a message and finds out the king eliminated 7 of his classmates at once. Just then, Mitsuki arrives and says that she came to say goodbye. Meanwhile, Nobuaki steps into a graveyard and finds a notebook with a letter inside. Suddenly, it turns into a corpse and he finds a picture of Chimi's father inside the letter. Nobuaki then thinks about the apology and wonders if Chimi was a part of the king's game at the village. He then realizes that Chimi has a sister as well and finds out that Natsuko is the other sister. This reminds him of everything Natsuko did and makes him wonder if Natsuko is a King's Game survivor as well. Meanwhile, Kenta is confused about her saying goodbye and Mitsuki replies that one can send the text to themselves as well. She decided to send that text to herself and protect Kenta but sent the other one to Natsuko as she couldn't forgive her. Following that, she asks Kenta to call her cute and eventually confesses her love. This results in Kenta freaking out, not knowing what to do, and Mitsuki starts crying and apologizes for putting him in an awkward position. She then starts running away but Kenta follows her and hugs her from behind. She asks Kenta to let go as she doesn't have signals in that area to send the text. But Kenta hugged her even more tightly, feeling all the soft spots he possibly could. Mitsuki mentions how it isn't fair as girls are weaker than boys. He then suggests doing the deed with him and starts kissing her. This results in Mitsuki getting overjoyed and mentioning how she can now tell him something. Mitsuki asks Kenta to meet his demise with her and mentions how he will be eliminated if she doesn't survive. It'll be like he followed her to his demise and finds it really romantic. Mitsuki suggests making their love eternal but Kenta argues that he won't be doing such things. She starts kissing him again and wants to persuade Kenta, but he replies that if Mitsuki were to pass away, everything would be over. Kenta elaborates that she will only find happiness and warmth if she lives. However, she doesn't understand Kenta's words and decides to go and send a text to herself and Natsuko. Surprisingly, Kenta stops her and punches her in the gut, resulting in her passing out. He then takes her out of the village and decides to send the text to himself, asking Mitsuki to live long for the both of them. Kenta then notices a message from the king regarding completed obedience, making him believe that he saved Mitsuki by sacrificing his own life. Meanwhile, Nobuaki is on his way back, wanting to ask the others to get out before midnight. He then notices light coming from the radio tower, thinking if Kenta took Mitsuki there to send her text. The thought of Kenta sending one to himself occurs and Nobuaki starts making his way towards that spot. On the other hand, one of their classmates is making a corpse touch her melons, letting him know that it was their challenge. But the challenge isn't complete as he is not alive, making the girl panic. On the other hand, another one of them eliminates both her parents and destroys the house, struggling to find something important to her. She then notices her dog and decides to take its life as well but realizes that she can't and starts crying. Elsewhere, Nobuaki finally catches up with the two of them and Kenta informs Nobuaki that he sent the text to himself and Natsuko. Shockingly, nothing is happening to him and Kenta recalls how Natsuko told them that sending the text from another phone won't do anything. Nobuaki then tells Kenta that he is glad at least he will be able to survive, only to remember how he gave himself the task of protecting Mitsuki. He then notices that both of their names are on the students about to get punished. He starts freaking out and soon after, Kenta starts struggling to stand up. Nobuaki tells him that Mitsuki's name is on the list as well and he asks Nobuaki to leave him alone with her. He tries crawling towards Mitsuki and tells Nobuaki that he still has things he needs to do. Kenta then realizes that he is blacking out but Mitsuki wakes up at the same time as well. Both of them try holding each other's hand but fail to do so and pass away. Afterward, Nobuaki puts the two of them together and makes them hold hands, telling Kenta that he gave him the hope he needed. Nobuaki starts tearing up and gets a call from Natsuko, asking if Mitsuki and Kenta are still alive. Natsuko tells Nobuaki that the second she received the message from Mitsuki, she did the deed and completed her obedience. She even found out that it was Kenta who probably sent the message, calling him an idiot for trying to play the hero. She further wonders if Kenta got what he wanted, which was to meet his demise with his beloved Mitsuki. She then cuts the call, commenting on how she will be the one to take Nobuaki's life. Following that, Teruaki locks himself in the bathroom and realizes how insane a girl Natsuko is. He then hears Natsuko knocking on the bathroom stall and asking what he is doing there. She then climbs the stall, stealing Teruaki's phone, and tells her that he will meet his end if he tries to call someone. Elsewhere, Nobuaki is contemplating the letters sent to the people who are being punished, realizing this wasn't a part of the previous king's game. Apparently, these letters were the result of a mutation that the king didn't anticipate himself. Nobuaki figures that it must be a bug in the game and decides to collect all the letters. He then receives a call from Riona on Kenta's phone, who tells him that she has some intel that will be his if he comes to her house. Later, he finally arrives at her house and she comes out complaining for making her wait for so long. Surprisingly, she suggests going somewhere else as her parents could misunderstand if she brings him home. They arrive at a nearby park and she shows him an article about a mysterious group suicide she found. Turns out something similar happened at another school. That's not all, as Natsuko's name was mentioned there as well. Riona mentions that Natsuko probably knew about the king's game, but Nobuaki doesn't really react, making her a little surprised. Additionally, Riona mentions Ria's name, which shocks Nobuaki, and he starts asking her for further details. Riona pushes her away and tells Nobuaki that she was researching the king's game and that led her to his old school as well. She then questions Nobuaki about Ria and the letters, and he lets her know that Ria was an old classmate and everyone who is about to get punished receives random letters. He then shows her the notebook that he found in the village, saying that it also mentions the letters. He figures that there must be something more to these letters, and Riona shows him the ones she collected. Turns out she found something interesting, which is that all the letters are the same. This results in Nobuaki getting a clue, making him cry and thank Riona for showing him a light of hope. Just then, Natsuko arrives and Nobuaki takes her somewhere else to talk in private. There, he asks Natsuko if she got an order to eliminate someone herself, and she agrees. He then asks if there was someone special to her that she eliminated, and Natsuko agrees. Additionally, Nobuaki mentions her little sister who got separated from her, letting Natsuko know that she was his special person. This results in Natsuko making fun of him for thinking that they will reach an understanding just because Nobuaki pounded her sister. Meanwhile, all the other classmates are gathered and Teruaki tells them something. Just then, Natsuko and Nobuaki also arrive and Riona shows him the next order. Turns out that the order is for the students to remove and assign their own fingers one by one. Breaking the bone also counts, and the number of fingers depends on them. Each finger on the right is 1 positive point, while the ones on the left are negative points. One can also assign their points to someone else, and the one with a negative score at the end will be punished. Natsuko mentions that if someone breaks fingers on their left and gives them points, they just need to break fingers on their right hand. Nobuaki then mentions that one can give points to themselves and they are allowed to pass as well. He then thinks about the number the 11 of them will play and then realizes that the last number belongs to Natsuko's best friend, Amy. Teruaki then stands up and suggests they stop fighting and think of a solution together, but Natsuko refuses his offer. She then shows everyone that she has Teruaki's phone, forcing him to obey her. Ryu then tells Nobuaki that he agrees with Teruaki and that he didn't forget what Nobuaki said to them that day. Yusuke is the first one to start and pass his turn. Natsuko asks if he can make that decision so easily, and he replies that they shouldn't be fighting. Ryu asks Nobuaki to pass as well, and he does. After him, Kanazawa and another classmate pass as well. This results in Natsuko getting a little frustrated while Nobuaki thinks about how calm it is. Ryu also passes, which leaves Teruaki, Riona, Natsuko, Aya, Rina, and Amy. Now it is Teruaki's turn and he takes him away for a moment. He begins cutting Nobuaki's hair and tells Natsuko that it's time like this when one should do what they can. He continues to cut the hair, promising to tell Nobuaki the details later. Furthermore, he comments that he wants to become a stylist someday and wants to go to a cosmetology school after high school. Nobuaki finds out that the scissors he is holding cost 50,000 yen, shocking him. Natsuko starts pressuring him to wrap it up and he tells Nobuaki that everything will be over pretty soon. After cutting his hair, Teruaki thanks Nobuaki and breaks his own fingers. He then falls onto the ground, and when Nobuaki tries to help, he asks if Nobuaki likes his haircut. This makes Nobuaki cry as well and asks Teruaki to not break any more of his fingers. He replies that broken bones will eventually heal and he will take this chance to steal both his and Nobuaki's phone from Natsuko. Apparently, everyone else knows about this plan as well, and that is why they all passed. Teruaki then mentions that he needs negative points for that and picks up a rock to break his other fingers. He smashes all 4 of his fingers and keeps on slamming them with a rock until none of his fingers are left unbroken. With that being said, he asks Natsuko to return their phones or she will use these points on her. If she were to receive these points, Natsuko would be forced to break all 5 of her fingers to get in the safe zone. She then questions what he will do with the points if she returns the phone. Teruaki replies that they will never heal completely and he has already lost his dream, mentioning that there is no point in him living anymore. This forces Natsuko to return their phone to Nobuaki, but just as she does, he gives 1 positive point to Nobuaki and 4 negative to Natsuko, and 1 negative to Amy. This makes her confront Teruaki for breaking the deal, but he replies that it was never a part of the deal. He then advises Natsuko to pass as there are still 4 people left who might give him the positive points, if they are willing to break their fingers for her, that is. Not having the guts to do so, Natsuko passes and Teruaki laughs at her, making her know that no one will help her after she plays with them. Teruaki further reveals that he gave 1 negative point to Amy because she herself asked him to. This makes Natsuko confront Amy while Ryu and Nobuaki try to console Teruaki. Ryu tells Nobuaki that Teruaki did it so he can end the king's game and they all can come together as a group. The next 3 girls pass and Amy is the only one remaining. Natsuko starts asking Amy to break her bones for her, but seeing her not give much of a reaction, Natsuko picks up the rock and thanks Teruaki for it. She then walks towards Amy, and just when she is about to hit her, Amy wonders what Natsuko thinks of her and asks Teruaki to give her 1 negative point because she wants to check if Natsuko would save her. She was ready to protect her if Natsuko had given her a positive point. Natsuko then starts slamming the rock on her fingers again and again until Nobuaki pushes her away and pins her onto the ground. She tells Nobuaki that people make bad decisions while they are on the brink, and this might make Amy give her points to Natsuko. Following that, Natsuko tells Amy to give the points to her and tells Nobuaki that all the difficulties she has been through have taught her that. Eventually, she reminds Amy of the time when they became friends and how she helped Amy improve her asthma and offered to help her. This results in Amy pushing Nobuaki away and telling everyone that Natsuko was just scared and was driven to the brink. She then tells Natsuko that the 2 of them will remain friends forever and she will give her the 4 points she needs. But Natsuko grabs her hand and breaks her thumb as well, mentioning that Amy was most likely thinking of eliminating herself. This is why she broke her thumb, so she gives the positive point to herself and returns back to 0. The 2 of them then start crying and everyone receives a message about completed obedience from the king. At night, Nobuaki is at the hospital and Natsuko comes out along with Amy. Nobuaki asks Amy about her condition and wonders if Natsuko will now change her ways. But she replies that changing her ways will not affect the king's game at all, mentioning that maybe her game was different from his previous game. She agrees to tell him about it later as Natsuko plans to reveal his half-baked plans and false hope in front of everyone. Soon after, Teruaki kicks Nobuaki's back in a joking manner and reveals that he will never be able to move his hand again. However, he doesn't regret anything as his right hand is still okay. Teruaki then asks Nobuaki about Ryu, and he replies that he went to buy him a present, revealing that Ryu is more excited about the day when he becomes a stylist than himself. With that being said, the 2 of them gather along with the other classmates. Nobuaki once again reveals that he has played the king's game and asks everyone to at least trust the person next to them as he wants to save them all. Teruaki comments that he trusts Nobuaki and doesn't want things to end this way, and the other classmates start to agree. Suddenly, Natsuko and Amy arrive and she tells everyone that everyone is on their own in this game. Furthermore, Natsuko asks Nobuaki to compete one-on-one with her until the next order appears. This results in Nobuaki tearing up. Realizing that Natsuko hasn't changed a bit even after what Teruaki and Amy did, Natsuko starts confronting Nobuaki, telling him that only one person can survive the king's game and he would eliminate anyone for his own life as well. This makes Riona question why Natsuko saved Amy when it was a great chance to get rid of her. She replies that she was only returning a favor and further tells that she had eliminated the person she hated in the last King's game, but the one she wanted to protect took their own life. She then hugs Nobuaki, asking depressed, and tells him that she won. Suddenly, they all receive a message from the king, saying that Teruaki will be punished for breaking the rules. Suddenly, blood starts coming out of Teruaki's neck and Natsuko reveals that she went through his phone and blocked the king. Teruaki mentions that he is glad Ryu isn't here because he is a wimpy god. He then apologizes to Nobuaki for not being able to help him anymore. After he passes away, Natsuko tells others to block the king if they want to escape this hell as well. She then starts pressuring Amy to block the king as well, and just then, Ryu arrives and can't fathom seeing Teruaki like that. He starts acting as if everything is normal and tries making him wear the cap he bought as a gift, making Nobuaki realize that everyone is starting to go mad. Natsuko is running, thinking about the order being that everyone is to run to the summit of Nugakubai. After 8 hours, the class members furthest away from the goal will be punished. Before any of that happens, Ryu still can't process Teruki's demise and Riona tries to calm him down but fails. She then mentions the next object and Nobuaki forces Ryu to snap out of it and tells him that Teruaki has already met his demise. Amy then wonders why Nobuaki isn't going and he invites her to go together, but she refuses. He informs her about the punishment, but Amy doesn't care and forcefully gives her a piggyback, refusing to run until Amy starts running on her own. Nobuaki mentions how he can't just abandon a classmate when he knows that she will meet her demise. Amy then asks him to put her down and she asks him the reason Nobuaki is trying to save her. but Nobuaki replies that he doesn't need a reason and runs away. Meanwhile, all the other classmates are running as well, and Takuya pushes Masatoshi off the stairs. Takuya then mentions that Teruaki changed his mind for a second, but turns out he can't work with the rest of them. The others suggest leaving Masatoshi behind, as they will lose the challenge if they stay behind as well. They tell Aya that they won't be able to make it if they keep on wasting time. Meanwhile, Nobuaki and Amy catch up to Riona, and she doesn't look in the best condition. Nobuaki asks Amy to rest with Riona while he runs in the opposite direction. While he is gone, Riona asks Amy how she feels seeing Teruaki meet his demise and how she can't even imagine herself in such a situation. She further comments on how she won't let this game turn her life upside down, but also how she is out of energy. Amy mentions how Nobuaki still isn't, as he was matching her pace all this time and puts others' lives before his. She wonders why he does such things, and Riona replies that he has probably gone through worse than they can imagine. Just then, Nobuaki returns with 2 sodas and gives it to both the girls. Riona asks Nobuaki if he doesn't have a sense of emergency, asking him to run and not wait for the 2 of them. With that being said, Amy and Nobuaki move forward while Riona promises to catch up with them soon. Later, they run into Ryu and the others, and Aya informs Nobuaki about what happened with Masatoshi. Rina tells Nobuaki not to blame them, and Nobuaki reassures them that he won't and asks them to take Amy along. Rina wonders why he will go after leaving Amy in their care. Meanwhile, Riona is still struggling to keep running and eventually falls onto the ground. Suddenly, Nobuaki arrives and tells her that he returned because she couldn't open the soda can. She plays along and forces him to open it for her. Suddenly, Masatoshi also appears on the scene and asks Nobuaki when he gets ahead of him. Now, there are only 4 hours left, and the 3 of them start running while Nobuaki worries about the 2 of them. Suddenly, Nobuaki finds himself in another dimension where a monster-like creature suggests leaving them behind. That monster turns out to be Natsuko, but he comments on how he won't let Natsuko get her way. Seeing him freaking out makes Masatoshi comment on how he has his mind full of worries, while Nobuaki keeps on thinking about others along with his own worries. Nonetheless, he decides to run, and Riona asks Nobuaki to run as well. Later, Ryu calls Nobuaki and informs him about their location, and Nobuaki wishes everyone good luck. Rina calls him a soft guy, but Ryu disagrees, saying that he can be kind because he is strong. Meanwhile, the 3 of them are still running and eventually stop. Riona tells Nobuaki to not hold himself back, as if he matches his pace with them, he'll never make it. Suddenly, Masatoshi starts feeling sick, and Nobuaki suggests taking a break. During the break, Nobuaki and Riona spend their time looking at the sunrise, and Nobuaki starts seeing Chimi and Riona. He tries touching her but gets slapped by Riona instead. Just then, Masatoshi dozed off and fell into the water. He starts drowning, and Nobuaki takes off his shirt to jump, but Riona starts to stop him. But Nobuaki pushes her away and jumps in the water. However, Masatoshi's weight is a little too much for a loser like Nobuaki to handle, and he starts pounding his chest, trying to wake him up. After some time, Masatoshi loses the last of the air inside his body, and Nobuaki is forced to let him go. This depresses Nobuaki, and he decides to end his life as well, but starts seeing Kenta out of nowhere. Mitsuki also appears and starts motivating him. Additionally, Teruaki appears as well along with Chimi, and he finally gets out of the water. Riona calls out for Nobuaki, and he replies that Masatoshi met his demise, but she asks him to come out. The 2 of them then sit by the beach, and Nobuaki looks really down, making Riona comment on how this isn't like him. She then gives him a hug, making an excuse that she is trying to warm him up. Riona tells him that she was scared that he might not come back alive, and asks Nobuaki to keep his chin up for her. Eventually, the 2 of them arrive at the bridge that connects Honshu and Tatsujima. Apparently, they will have to cross 4 islands in order to reach Nugakubai. Nobuaki realizes that there are only 5 minutes left, and the person farthest away will be punished. Soon after, Nobuaki makes an excuse that his shoelaces come off and sits behind Riona. He is trying to be the last one behind. Just then, the message from the king arrives, and Riona realizes what Nobuaki was trying to do. Natsuko, frustrated, slapped Nobuaki and asked if he deliberately kept himself in last place. Nobuaki told her that the last place was Masatoshi, and he urges her to keep going. He then realized that it was almost time for the punishment and asked Riona to decide who should take the lead. She got in frustration, reminding him of his promise that they would make it through together. Nobuaki reasoned with her, pointing out that since the last punishment, they hadn't been caught, but now one of them was destined for the next punishment. He suggested they settle it with a game of rock, paper, scissors. After playing, Riona loses, but Nobuaki decides to run behind her. She asked him if the loser was supposed to run behind, but Nobuaki told her it was normal for the winner to have the right to pick. This resulted in her kicking him straight in the nuts, and after that, she ran, while Nobuaki was behind her. Riona then asked him what his ex was like, because anyone would have a strange taste to go out with someone. She further told him that whoever he dates next had better be at least as good as her. he replied, admitting that it was too high a standard for him. Riona then started crying, expressing regret that she had never gotten to know him. Suddenly, Nobuaki began running away, while she begged him not to leave, pleading that people needed him and that he couldn't be executed. On the other hand, Ryu started crying, saying everyone's being executed. He then gets a message from the king, as it's time for Amy. Meanwhile, Amy, still running, suddenly decided to turn back and retrace her steps. She hadn't encountered Nobuaki and Riona yet, realizing they must be running on the opposite side of the island's road. Despite this fact, she felt immense gratitude towards Nobuaki for his unwavering encouragement. Determined to repay him, she resolved to save him this time. While she was running, a message notification flashed on her phone. Tragically, Amy was executed right there. However, on the other hand, Nobuaki came back to Natsuko, telling her that if she has read the texts, he thinks that Riona might kick him again, but she holds his hands and begins crying. With that being said, the two of them start running and he tells her the end of the last King's game. Apparently, after Ria's demise, the next challenge was to eliminate the person they liked the most, and Chimi asked him to eliminate her. But he refuses to do so and comments on how he wants to live the rest of his life with her. She doesn't listen and tries stabbing herself, but Nobuaki manages to stop her. However, she still manages to get stabbed somehow and starts bleeding. She apologizes to Nobuaki and tells him to survive no matter what. After that, the last message from the king came that was to either continue the game or get punished. Meanwhile, Natsuko arrives at the location and Takuya is right behind her. He suddenly falls into a trap and finds Natsuko standing in front of him. She mocks him for falling into her trap, but seeing how he still hasn't given up, she breaks his leg. On the other hand, Yuna runs into Natsuko, who tells Yuna the correct way to the spot. She thanks Natsuko but wonders why Natsuko would think that she would trust a person like her. This results in her going in the wrong direction as Natsuko told her the right one. On the other hand, Nobuaki and Riona run into Aya and Ryu and they inform Nobuaki how Yuna and Rina went ahead. Rina is running through the forest when she falls onto the ground and finds Takuya lying there. He asks her to help him and starts begging, but she digs her foot in his face, calling him pathetic. She decides to leave him there, telling him that Masatoshi must have felt the same way. Soon after, she runs into Yuna, who tells Rina the way that Natsuko told her about. While Rina decides to take the path Natsuko told her about, Yuna takes the other one. She then finds Yuna hanging from the cliff after going on the wrong path, and instead of helping her, Rina decides to let her go. Eventually, she reaches the location as well and is greeted by Natsuko. She questions Rina about the people she had to sacrifice and comments on how only one person can survive. This makes Rina freak out while Natsuko reminds her of all the misdeeds she did. This results in Rina getting hallucinations about the people she abandoned. Natsuko mentions how she eliminated all her previous classmates, asking if Rina could do the same. As a result, she starts running away from Natsuko and ends up falling down the cliff. Just 60 seconds remain when Nobuaki and the others are about to reach the goal, but Natsuko comes in their way and Nobuaki pushes her away, allowing Ryu and Riona to pass. Nobuaki then gets up and tries to leave, but Natsuko grabs his leg. Meanwhile, Ryu tells Riona that he wants to get strong, so he gets acknowledged by Nobuaki and Riona mocks him for wanting to be acknowledged by others. Eventually, the two of them arrive at the location and Riona wonders why Nobuaki is. Luckily, he arrives at the same time and asks if she has seen Takuya and the others. Nonetheless, Riona gets jealous of Nobuaki holding Aya and tells him to put her down. With that being said, Nobuaki asks Ryu to check how much obedience has been confirmed. Nobuaki then realizes that the others who were ahead of them didn't arrive and asks Natsuko if she was behind it. But Natsuko doesn't like him blaming her for everything and thanks Nobuaki for the kick earlier. She mentions the remaining 3 must have been lost and calls them morons. Natsuko then wonders what the next order will be and if it will be the last one. Suddenly, Ryu hits Nobuaki with a rock and he falls onto the ground. Ryu mentions how he will become stronger. He then mentions that the next order is to cut your own body parts and put them together to make a human doll. Riona can't believe this order and doesn't know how they can cut off their own limbs. She further mentions how that would make them a murderer, but Ryu tells her that he can cut off his own limbs but would need help with the head. Riona replies that there are a ton of problems with his reasoning. Just then, Natsuko gives Ryu a chainsaw, mentioning that he can do whatever he wants with it. Without any hesitation, Ryu starts the chainsaw, and when Riona tries to stop him, he threatens her to stay back. She then starts the chainsaw once again and starts cutting his leg, but it gets stuck. Natsuko gives him a hand and pushes the chainsaw down, cutting his entire leg. She then asks him to cut the other limb as he will bleed out if he waits for too long. However, Natsuko then notices that he has already passed away, and this time, Natsuko picks up the chainsaw. Riona calls her a monster and wonders if she is even a human. Natsuko starts walking towards her and suddenly, Amy starts choking Natsuko for eliminating Ryu, but she attacks Amy with the chainsaw, ending her life as well. with only the three of them left. Natsuko starts moving towards Riona and she starts asking for help. Natsuko makes fun of Riona for being so desperate and throws her aside. Just when she is about to slice her neck off, Nobuaki asks Natsuko to stop and she does. Natsuko tells Nobuaki about the new order and how Ryu did this to himself. Riona elaborates on how Ryu wanted to become a man like him in Teruaki. Natsuko asks Nobuaki if he is going to dig graves for the ones who lost their lives. Nobuaki questions her about the reason the king gave them such an insane order, but she doesn't care and just wants to complete it. He starts asking her to think of ways they can put an end to the game, but she yells at him for still thinking that way and questions if the two of them were doing something in secret before coming there. Having no other choice, Riona shows her the letters that the people getting punished received. Surprisingly, Natsuko shows them her list of those letters that she gathered during her last game. Nobuaki then informs them that it was a virus that started in the village and later slipped into the internet and started existing online. He then suggests putting the text together as they might find another clue. Furthermore, Nobuaki mentions how Natsuko saved those letters to end the game someday, but she replies that she did it because it could have helped her survive. Natsuko then takes Riona's phone and puts the letters together. It makes a sentence that says that the king's game won't end until all of humanity is destroyed. Nobuaki realizes that none of them can survive, and even if they do, they spread it to other people and the game continues. In order to save humanity, they have no other choice but to end their lives. However, Natsuko starts mocking Nobuaki for thinking as if he is the savior of humanity and slaps him, asking him to end his life first. She then mentions how Nobuaki must have played the game and saw his loved ones meet their demise. She further mentions that she plays the part to put an end to their suffering by being the bad person. Natsuko then starts choking Nobuaki, but Riona stabs her with the chainsaw, allowing Nobuaki to get back up. He feels a bit guilty for making Riona do such a thing, but she mentions how she is only alive because of Nobuaki and asks to spend a little time together. Suddenly, Natsuko gets back up and attacks Nobuaki, mentioning that it's better to eliminate the person she loves herself. She then meets her demise and Riona tries to reassure Nobuaki that she will save her. But Nobuaki replies that it is already too late and asks her to survive. Soon after, he loses his life as well and finds himself in a beautiful land where Chimi along with the other victims greets him. Meanwhile, Riona drags Nobuaki's body to the beach and gives him a kiss. She then starts begging him to say something and eventually drowns along with Nobuaki's body in the ocean. This was all about the King Games participants. Do you think they were able to put an end to the King's Game? Comment King below and let us know if you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next